Newberg is having a hard time staying out of the news. You know, with the school board's Black Lives Matter sign ban, the students who created an online slave trade, and the school staffer who showed up to work in blackface. So, in light of all that, we've got a question for the mayor.
Is there a racism problem in Newberg?
There are racist incidents that occur and have occurred, and it's not just isolated to these recent instances.
And almost 3 years after a Vancouver woman was murdered by her husband, a new law that helps domestic violence victims stay away from their abusers is up and running in Washington.
And you can actually look at GPS coordinates and points on a map to find out where an offender is located.
Also, despite walking out this weekend, Republicans actually showed up today to vote on Oregon's new political maps. But that doesn't mean they're happy with the redistricting plan. Here's the story.
Was that cut off? Did I just hear that in my ear? The story. That's the whole thing. I'm Dan Haggerty. Thanks for being with us. All the ways to communicate with us at the bottom of your screen. You can email us at thestory@kgw.com. You can find me on Twitter by using that hashtag HeyDan. We want to hear what's on your mind throughout the show. Let's get started. Big story time. Let's get started here on a Monday. See, Newberg's school board, they're set to vote again on its ban on the Black Lives Matter and pride flags in schools. And now they're lumping in everything else, right? They're talking anything that they deem controversial or political or even quasi-political, which sounds like pretty much everything, but that's what they're voting on. It's almost certainly going to pass. And the school district is almost certainly going to be sued over the ban. Both the ACLU and the teachers union in Newberg have promised to take them to court over this. But tonight, let's not talk about that. I want to put the vote aside and what's happened and focus instead on what's happening in this small community that's been thrust into the national headlines. Let's hear from the kids for a change. And we've heard from plenty of adults. So let's hear from the kids who testified at last week's school board meeting.
It is extremely insensitive and disrespectful to take down flags that represent a minority group of people. It shows a lot of ignorance to think that banning those flags is going to make the problem disappear.
It's horrendous and unacceptable. A simple pride or BLM flag in a classroom shows the love and acceptance that we need. Pride flags can literally save someone's life, and you're just going to take that away.
The Pride and Black Lives Matter flags are not a want, but a need. So many of my classmates go home that do not support them for who they are, and their safe place is at your schools. Taking those flags away, you are abandoning your students.
The passing of these resolutions are not wins for you. They threaten the safety and livelihood of thousands of children under your care. The consequences of your actions will be on your hands. The blood of my peers will be on your hands.
Man, I mean, those are some serious words, but there's some serious stuff going on in this community over the past several weeks even. There was what we're showing you on the screen right now, this social media slave trade where black students were targeted in this mock slave auction that was going around on Snapchat. There was a staff member at an elementary school recently who showed up to work in blackface to protest the vaccine mandate. I mean, that sentence doesn't make sense at all. Adults who graduated from Newberg schools, they say they weren't safe either during their time. S. Renee Mitchell, she's a Pulitzer Prize nominated journalist who graduated from Newberg High School in the 70s, and she wrote a column for the Oregonian over the weekend that we think is worth your time. She wrote, quote, "I remember rocks being thrown in my direction as I walked between buildings at Newberg High School. Thumbtacks were left on my classroom seats. Students regularly lined the hallways near my locker to hurl an almost daily parade of racial insults. I also remember willing myself not to cry as an older football player punched me while my homeroom teacher and classmates watched. I was 14. So we talked to the mayor of Newberg about all this stuff. He says he doesn't think the racist incidents we've seen over the past few weeks are isolated and chalked it all up to a problem with education.
Is there a racism problem in Newberg?
There are racist incidents that occur and have occurred. And it's not just isolated to these recent instances. There have been instances over the years. I'd like to think that they're isolated and that they're handled, hopefully, quickly and appropriately. But generally, I do not believe there's a racism problem here. But I think there is a question that we education, and of course, we're back to the school board, and I think education is hugely important. I think that's shown by arriving in blackface, referring to Rosa Parks. The slave trade. I think we have an opportunity to really try to help educate people that may not know as much as they might about some of these very difficult issues in our history.
So he says the city is working on a few things. They have some diversity initiatives. There's a task force and listening sessions. But honestly, the city can really only get involved to a certain point. I mean, the school board is a separate entity from the city. And as it stands right now, this ban is going to pass in the school board. But before we end this segment, we wanted to make a note of some of the ways that students from other schools have been supporting the kids at Newberg. After all, at the end of the day, this is about students, the way they are learning from this, the way they are reacting. Let's take a look at some of the stuff that we've seen. Students, for instance, from Tigard, they went to their football game against Newberg last weekend with pride banners and Black Lives Matter signs. These photos are from Ryan Clark with the Newberg Graphic, a reporter who's been covering this story from the beginning. The football team from Tigard took a knee to support Newberg as well, and a senior football player stood up and told the adults that if they don't like it, they can leave.
All we expect is that you let each of us perform in an environment of safety, tolerance, acceptance, and respect. We call it being a star. This means not threatening or ridiculing anyone in attendance based on their race, gender, age, color, national origin, ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation, or religion. If you can't meet these expectations, you could potentially be banned from this and future interscholastic events.
Of course, we're going to keep our eye on Newberg in the coming days, as we have since the beginning of this. And if you have a story or an idea or something that you think we should be considering as we cover this issue, please email us at thestory@kgw.com or use the hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. Well, it only took a week, but the Oregon legislature finally passed a redistricting plan. I know, like, you could barely sleep last night wondering if it was going to happen. Of course, they didn't do this without many, many bumps in the road, including Republican leader Christine Drazen trying and failing to censure House Speaker Tina Kotek for going back on a deal that they made earlier this year. On Saturday, then, Republicans boycotted the House floor session. They said, we're not showing up. Democrats waited for them all day long, and they never did. And when they didn't, Tina Kotek gave them a deadline. She said, show up by 9:30 a.m. on Monday or the session is over. So on Monday morning, they showed up. A lot of people thought they'd continue to walk out, but they didn't. Lo and behold, the Republicans arrived. So what convinced them?
Many of us are only here because we don't trust the Secretary of State to draw these maps either.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Secretary of State, Shemia Fagan, a Democrat who would be put in charge of the legislative district maps. That's what would happen if the lawmakers didn't show up and reach this agreement by today's deadline. Now, the congressional maps would have gone to a panel of judges appointed by Oregon's Supreme Court justice. Now, over the weekend, Democrats, they did come up with a new congressional map to try and compromise here. Their initial proposal was on the left. All right, soak that in. The new proposal is on the right. You can see the differences there. Now, according to 538, the new proposal, the one on the right, creates less solid blue districts than the old one. In fact, one of the districts would even be more of kind of a swing district, meaning it could go blue or red. You can believe it. But that's also the district Republicans are kind of having a problem with here. You can see it goes all the way from the Portland metro area, where, of course, there are more Democrats, down the Cascades and over into Bend, where there are traditionally more Republicans. And a lot of Republicans are calling that gerrymandering.
My husband spent many of his younger years growing up in Bend, and his mother and family members still live there. He asked me, how in the heck does Bend have anything to do with Lake Oswego and West Lynn? The only thing I could tell him is, well, maybe those residents vacation over there.
How in the heck, you ask? Well, Democrats say, we'll answer that one. At least they tried. Actually, they believe that Bend has gotten more liberal over the past 10 years, so they actually have more in common with the metro area than maybe even other parts of Eastern Oregon.
Bend is a unique place, and over the last several decades, we have seen significant growth and change as new industries, attitudes, and communities of interest have emerged that are distinct from our neighbors in Eastern Oregon. Our industries are much more similar to that of Oregon City, Milwaukee, Redmond, and the other cities that propose Congressional District 5.
All right, now, I want you to listen to another argument that Republicans are making here, likely because they're the minority and they don't agree with the maps. It's probably why this is part of it, but I do think a lot of you watching on both sides of the aisle might agree.
The idea that politicians should be able to draw their own maps and that we would then expect the public to accept what we drew. with absolutely no self-interest in mind, no partisan overtones, that we were completely and totally objective, is not realistic in today's political climate.
Not a bad point. Pretty good point. So there's this group called People, Not Politicians. They're trying to get an initiative on the 2022 ballot to create an independent redistricting commission. That means lawmakers wouldn't be involved anymore. So right now they're working on gathering signatures to get that on the ballot. They tried the same thing and failed in 2020. We'll see how they do in 2022. Now, I want to talk about something that we have covered on this show since we first launched it, since before the pandemic even began. It was the murder of Tiffany Hill, a Vancouver woman who was killed by her estranged husband. Out of that tragedy came a new law called the Tiffany Hill Act, which allows GPS tracking of abusers to warn victims if they come near. Tim Gordon talked to Hill's family and those implementing this program in Clark County.
The pictures of Tiffany Hill may remind you she was a Marine, a mom to 3 kids, and Tiffany was the victim of domestic violence that ultimately took her life. Despite doing what she could to escape it, Tiffany was shot by her estranged husband, who later killed himself. It happened in the parking lot of a Vancouver elementary school in late November 2019. Tiffany was murdered in front of her 3 children and her mother, who was injured by the gunfire.
Physically, I'm better. I'm still in therapy and gotta see my doctor.
Nearly 2 years later, the real challenge remains the loss.
It's something you'll never get over, but you'll live with.
Joined by youngest daughter Tabitha, this is Aurea Condi's first interview since her daughter's death.
She was like my best friend. So we got to a point in our lives that always back and forth, always calling. She would come here for months. I would go there. We did vacations.
It takes a close family. Tiffany's children, Jasmine, Cameron, and Kayla, now 7, 9, and 12, live in New York with Aurea. Tabitha, along with another sister, help out, always remembering Tiffany.
She supported me in everything that I did and always made sure that I knew that I can do whatever I set my mind to. I can talk to her about anything, and I miss hearing her voice more than words can describe.
People here in Clark County remember Tiffany too, and along with family celebrate a new law in her name. The Washington State Legislature passed the Tiffany Hill Act more than a year ago.
This is called the Rely Alert XC4.
It allows judges to order accused abusers to wear GPS ankle devices monitored by officials and linked to an app on the victim's phone.
And you can actually look at GPS coordinates and points on a map to find out where an offender is located.
If a domestic violence offender gets too close and violates a no contact order, an alert goes off. Tiffany's husband was in the school parking lot for 20 minutes before she arrived. This system could have alerted her and saved her life. Vancouver Police Sergeant Tonya Wolstein was a detective on the domestic violence unit in 2019.
I texted with her the morning she died. So to me, it's very personal. It's very important.
Wolstein got to know Tiffany trying to protect her. Her violent death was devastating.
It's been almost 2 years now, but there's not been a day that's gone by that I haven't thought about Tiffany and her family. She's got 3 beautiful, wonderful children.
So a system that has a good chance of saving others seems a fitting tribute.
So this is another great tool to help people like Tiffany be aware that there are abusers in the area, be aware that there are abusers coming to harm or kill them, and give them the opportunity to leave, give them the opportunity to call police.
Clark County, in partnership with 2 Watch Monitoring, has 10 ankle devices available, and judges' orders have a half dozen currently in use. Knowing that reminds Aurea Condi what a pastor told her at church.
You know, God is not the author of things that happen in our lives, but He is the Redeemer. So that I take into heart, because my daughter is being redeemed and we are being redeemed through this to help others, you know, to set something forward that I'm going to see something positive come out of it.
And now the hope is the Tiffany Hill Act gets GPS monitoring like this happening across the state. Tim Gordon, KGW News.
After a long, dry summer, it's finally raining, which hopefully means we're on our way out of fire season. But in the meantime, is there anything we can do to make future wildfires less intense? Oregon State researchers say, well, yeah.
This study shows that fuel reduction thinning to moderate fire behavior, it works.
And speaking of wildfires, let's spend some time talking about who's most impacted by them in the West.
a lot of these minority groups are forced into a situation where they have to move into areas that are more prone to wildfires, specifically when you're talking about Latino immigrants.
When the story continues. Welcome back. Always go through your questions and your comments during the break. Keep sending them in to the story at kgw.com or use the hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. I also want to remind you about our Hey Help campaign. This week we're asking you to please consider donating to Street Roots. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with them. They're a nonprofit weekly newspaper sold by people experiencing homelessness to earn an income. If you want to help them out, please open up the camera on your phone, use the QR code on your screen. It'll take you to a donation page, or you can go to kgw.com/heyhelp. This is a micro donation drive, so feel free to give any amount you'd like, no matter how small. So we're on our way out of fire season, which means we don't have to think about wildfires again until next fire season, which will be here before we know it. It always sneaks up on us pretty quickly. It's become a really big part of people's lives here in the Pacific Northwest. So researchers are trying to find ways to change that. Here's Keely Chalmers.
What we saw last year in Oregon, according to scientists, will only get worse. Massive wildfires will get even bigger, burning even more. But new research out of Oregon State University suggests just thinning the forest can go a long way to calming the flames.
This study shows that fuel reduction thinning to moderate fire behavior, it works.
James Johnston is a forest ecologist at Oregon State.
Well, communities in the western United States are behind the 8 ball when it comes to fire.
So he and a team of researchers are trying to get us caught up. Their research focused on a ponderosa pine forest in northeast Oregon. They compared thinned stands of trees with unthinned control stands and used computer modeling to predict the behavior of future fires. They found
most fuel reduction projects in eastern Oregon thin from below. They cut down the smaller trees and leave the old, large, fire-resistant trees. They leave behind a forest that's less dense, and our studies show it has less fuel to burn in future fires.
Add to that some prescribed burning, Johnston says even better.
The only way to fight fire is with more fire.
While thinning alone will go a long way to reducing wildfires, Johnston says his research showed prescribed burning helps get rid of a lot of the fuel the fires need. But he says those controlled burns are not happening nearly as much as they should.
We're seeing more and more uncontrolled wildfire, but the amount of prescribed fire, that is, fires that we set to reduce surface fuels under moderate weather conditions, has remained flat for more than 20 years.
Johnson says the investment by Congress to better manage our country's forests is paying off. But as our climate continues to warm and the wildfire threat grows, we need to do a lot more. Keely Chalmers, KGW News.
I want to take a minute and talk about the people most affected by wildfires. Those people who have to evacuate, whose homes burn to the ground, those who are exposed to the most wildfire smoke. Last week, Nightly News aired a story about how communities of color are more impacted by wildfires proportionally in the West than other groups. I spoke with the reporter who did that story. Okay, NBC's Steve Patterson meeting with us now. Thank you so much for giving us some time. If you want to start by just explaining a little bit of your reporting and what you've learned here.
Well, Dan, I mean, I've been covering pretty much these major fires for the last 4 or 5 years. They've gotten exponentially worse over the last few years. And what we've seen, you know, people packing shelters, a lot of them have been minorities. I've seen that over my career. And we wanted to actually focus in and find out why that was happening, and found a recent study actually using the latest census data that found that minorities, we're talking Black, we're talking Latino, and we're talking Native Americans, about 50% more impacted by the impacts of wildfire. And that's health, that's socioeconomic. But when you're talking economics, particularly where I am in California, a lot of these minority groups are forced into a situation where they have to move into areas that are more prone to wildfires. Specifically, when you're talking about Latino immigrants, a lot of these people, especially migrants in the West, come out to farmland to do some farming work. So they live in these communities, they work on those farms, and because of the situation that they're in, when you're talking about a whole economy that is based around the harvest, based around seasonal work, these people need to be in the fields working to support their family. And because of that, they can't evacuate like other people can when there's one of these terrible wildfires, which because of the climate now are happening pretty much all year round. So we found workers that were working in these huge domes and plumes of smoke, the fire encroaching as they're trying to collect crops in the dead of night or the heat of the day. And unlike people that are evacuating at the same time, they're still in the fields doing that work.
Steve, what do we do with this information? So what is happening now that these types of details are coming out when it comes to lawmakers, or what should the average person take from this type of reporting? Because of course, we're in Oregon here, we just had historic wildfires that really traumatized this area and this community, and everyone's looking for ways to handle the future that looks as though we're going to see more and more of it.
Well, oh my God. I mean, the images that came out of Oregon, Dan, were horrific. And that's really happening now, again, across the entire American West. And I think, unfortunately, first, what has to happen is the science is finally waking up and catching up to the speed of these fires. So I think now, you know, a lot of people are identifying sort of the climate threat, identifying the fact that there need to be more mitigation strategies in place when you're talking about the health of forests, doing more prescribed burns. There was a bill recently in Oregon, also in California. The governors are waking up and trying to address that. As far as the communities that are impacted, it's a lot trickier of a situation. We spoke to a watchdog group in Northern California as they were going in, doing their work, providing proper protective equipment, PPE, to those workers in the fields that need something like an N95, a breathable mask, so they could continue doing the work, but also helping find affordable housing. That really is a big root cause of this, because there is simply no other place to live in these communities except those wildfire zones.
NBC's Steve Patterson, thank you so much. I appreciate you being with us.
Yeah.
Hey, let me know what you think. Keep sending in the questions, comments, all that stuff to the story at KGW.com. I'm going to read a few of your comments next. We'll finish this up. We'll see you after the break. All right, you might have heard that we have a weekly newsletter that people seem to really like, because I know you can't watch every single night, but we do some longer pieces that you typically don't see on other newscasts on this show. So it is worth going back and watching what we did last week, or if it's on a Friday, hey, what'd they do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that sort of thing. So we send out this newsletter that gives you the highlights, the big stories, the things that we got a big response to that people have been talking about, and we'll use this QR code to show it to you. So go ahead and open up the QR code on your phone, the camera on your phone, aim it at that QR code that is enormous behind me, lingering behind my shoulder, and it'll give you a link and you can sign up to our newsletter that way. Let us know what you think about it. If there's something you think we should add, stuff you think shouldn't be on there, let us know. We're always looking to tweak it, and you're our audience. You're the people we're trying to make happy with all this, so let us know what you think. I got a couple of emails. This one's from Renee. Renee said, as an independent, I abhor gerrymandering by either party. It doesn't allow for a true representation by voters. It goes against democratic principles of a real republic. I fully support an independent commission to draw legislative districts. How do you make it truly independent, though? That's a big question. I mean, they have a similar program in Washington where they have a commission, but the commission is chosen by the parties, right? So they have kind of 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans get on there. So how do you make it truly independent? That's something, maybe we'll go into this a little bit more as we continue to work on it. And then Craig wrote in about Newberg and said, it's because of KGW, Newberg is having this huge issue. Now look, I understand how people want to approach the media, and you should scrutinize us. You really should, all the time. I tell you to do that every night on the show. But it's because of KGW that Newberg is having this issue. It kind of depends on what you're using to define the word issue. If the issue is with racism and how the community is coming to terms with that and how they're making everyone feel comfortable and included, I don't see how KGW has anything to do with that. It feels like something that has a lot more history than us talking about it on the show. So maybe write me back. Tell me what you think issue is, because I'm not quite getting it at this point, how KGW is contributing to it. But hey, that's part of this show. I want to know what you have to say, Craig, or anybody else. Thanks for tuning in. Somebody told me the other day that I've been walking out this way, stage right. I'm on stage left. See ya.